All right, so today we're diving into something a little different.
Oh, yeah.
Leviticus chapter 11 specifically.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was looking at this source from my Christian space,
Uh-huh.
dietary laws. You sent this over to me, and I have to say, I thought, oh, this is going to be a bit dry,
Yeah, it can seem that way, huh?
but actually it's
Yeah.
really interesting.
It's amazing how much is packed in there.
Yeah.
When you kind of look past just the surface level do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
It really, you start thinking about it, and it's a window into how people saw the world back then.
It's like we're going back in time.
Yeah.
So, okay, it starts out by telling us which land animals are cool to eat, the clean ones.
Right. And there's a couple of criteria.
Yeah.
The animal has to have split hooves,
Okay.
and it has to chew the cud.
Oath.
Yeah. And that's not just, random.
Right.
That shows a pretty honestly sophisticated understanding of animals.
Yeah.
And how their digestion works.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially for back then.
Right. Long before modern science.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, if
Yeah.
it's got split hooves but doesn't chew cud, nope.
Off the menu.
Out.
Yeah.
I mean the other way around, too.
Yeah, exactly. How would they even figure that out back then?
Right. It makes you think about how closely they must have been watching the natural world.
Real careful observers.
For sure. Generations of probably just knowledge being built up.
Yeah.
Figuring out what works, what doesn't.
Right. What's good to eat? Okay, so then there's this whole thing about, these forbidden animals being unclean.
Yes. And it's serious stuff.
Yeah. It's don't even touch them. Don't even touch their carcasses.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
We've got to remember uncleanliness back then.
Yeah.
It wasn't just being dirty.
Right. Not just hygiene.
No. This was about ritual purity, like a spiritual thing.
Oh. Okay, so a spiritual contamination.
Exactly. It could mess up your connection with God.
Because for the Israelites, that purity, that was key for, being close to God.
So anything that messed with that was a major no-no.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
It makes you think about all the different cultures and their ideas about purity.
Right. Different taboos, things that are off limits.
Yeah. Because they're considered spiritually dangerous or whatever.
It's fascinating how that idea pops up all over the place.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's dive into the rules for seafood.
All right. So for sea creatures, it's fins, ani, scales. Both are a must.
Got it. Fins and scales, you're good.
You're in.
You're in.
But even here, there are some really interesting details.
Okay, like what?
Well, the text keeps using this word detestable.
Oh, yeah.
When it talks about the sea creatures that are off limits, that word, it really stands out. It's not just, okay, you can't eat that. It's more like a strong reaction, almost like they're saying, this is just wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe it's not just about avoiding poisonous stuff.
Right. Could there be something symbolic going on there, too?
Like a deeper meaning.
It's possible.
So many cultures, right, see those deep sea creatures as mysterious.
Totally, yeah. Connected to chaos.
The unknown.
Even the underworld.
Right. Okay, and then there's this long list of forbidden birds. A lot of them are birds of prey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Eagles, vultures, hawks.
Yeah, the ones that scavenge.
And if we think about the bigger picture,
Mm-hmm.
ritual purity and all that,
Yeah.
it starts to make more sense.
How so?
Well, remember we talked about how blood was considered sacred,
Mm-hmm.
belonging to God.
Right.
These types of birds, they're often associated with death
Right.
and eating blood, which would have been a big no-no.
Right.
So by not eating these birds, they're showing respect for life.
Okay, and acknowledging that blood is off limits.
Exactly. Something set apart for God.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because this whole idea of not eating blood, it wasn't unique to the Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It shows up in a lot of cultures. A lot of different groups throughout history have had similar rules about blood. It's seen as the essence of life itself.
Huh. So now I'm wondering, what about insects? Are they all a no-go?
Well, actually, there are a few exceptions, specifically the ones with jointed legs that they use for jumping.
Oh, okay.
So things like locusts, grasshoppers, crickets, they were allowed.
Really? I wouldn't have guessed that.
It is interesting, right? And this might be a sign of them paying attention to the environment.
What do you mean?
Well, those insects, they were everywhere, especially at certain times of year.
Yeah, that's true.
And they could be a good source of food when other options were scarce.
Right, so kind of like a backup food source.
Exactly. And it's possible they also saw it as a way to minimize harm.
Harm to other creatures, you mean?
Right, because those insects were so plentiful.
It wouldn't disrupt the balance as much.
Exactly. Well, hunting bigger animals, that would have a bigger impact.
So maybe there's an element of sustainability there.
Yeah. A recognition that everything's connected.
That's pretty cool. So we see all these layers to these dietary rules.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye.
I'm starting to get it. So it's not just about what you eat, but why you eat it?
Precisely. It's all tied in with their beliefs, their relationship with God, and how they saw the world around them.
And that's just the beginning.
We're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to uncover in Leviticus chapter 11.
Okay, so we've covered the basics of clean and unclean animals.
Right, the different categories.
But Leviticus doesn't just stop there.
Oh, no. There's more.
It gets into how unclean things actually are, like different levels.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not just a black and white, clean or unclean thing.
Yeah, it's more nuanced.
It's all about degrees. Like touching a dead animal, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But actually eating it, that's a whole other level of uncleanliness.
Okay.
And that's where all those rules come in.
Right, about purifying yourself and stuff.
Exactly. Washing clothes, immersing things in water. There's even that part about breaking pottery.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty intense.
It seems like a lot, right? But to them, it was crucial.
Because it wasn't just about physical cleanliness.
Right. It was about restoring their spiritual state.
Yeah, getting right with God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can imagine living with these rules.
Yeah.
It must have been a challenge.
It would affect your whole life.
Absolutely. Every single day.
You'd have to be so mindful of what you were doing, what you were touching.
Right. Like a constant awareness.
Yeah.
Almost like a form of spiritual practice, wouldn't you say?
It's like a form of mindfulness.
Exactly.
But through following these purity laws.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, there's this one rule that I found really interesting.
Okay.
About dead animals and seeds.
Yeah, that one kind of threw me for a loop. What's the deal with that?
So it says a carcass can make wet seed unclean, but not dry seed.
Right. It's like, why the distinction?
Well, when you think about it, it shows how closely they were paying attention to nature.
Really?
Yeah. Because water, right,
Yeah.
it allows things to soak in.
Yeah, it penetrates.
So a wet seed is more vulnerable to contamination.
Oh, okay, I see.
But a dry seed, it's got that hard outer shell, so it's more protected.
That makes sense. So it's not just a random rule, it's based on observation.
Exactly. They were observing how things worked in the real world and applying that knowledge to their religious practices.
So it's like an early form of science almost.
In a way, yeah. They were trying to make sense of their environment.
Wow, that's really cool. It makes me think about all the different dietary choices and restrictions that people have today.
Oh, absolutely. It's still a big part of our lives.
Whether it's for religious reasons or ethical concerns or health. Like, are we all just trying to figure out what's clean in our own way?
That's a great question. Because at the heart of it,
Yeah.
we all have these values.
Yeah.
And we're trying to live by them.
Trying to align our actions with what we believe.
Exactly. And food is such a powerful way to do that.
Right. So would you say there are parallels between these ancient laws and, say, someone who's vegan today?
Well, let's unpack that a bit. Why do you think people choose to be vegan?
Well, from what I've read, it seems like it's usually a mix of things. Concern for animals, the environment, and their own health.
Exactly. And, going back to Leviticus,
Yeah.
remember that thing about blood being sacred?
Representing life.
It's like they recognized
Yeah.
that every living creature has value.
Even the ones they weren't supposed to eat.
Right? And then there's that part about the insects.
Oh, right. Where some were okay to eat.
We were talking about how that might have been about minimizing harm.
Right. And sustainability.
It's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Because those are some of the same concerns that drive people to veganism today.
Wow. That's a really interesting connection. So even though the specific rules are different, the underlying ideas are kind of similar.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. Okay, I'm starting to see how these ancient laws can actually be relevant to us today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They offer a different perspective on some of the same questions we're still wrestling with.
It's pretty amazing how these dietary laws, from Leviticus, they can seem so strange to us now, but they connect to these really universal human things.
Right. Yeah. It's like no matter where you go in the world or when food, it's always more than just food.
It's true.
It's about identity, community, ritual. It could even be about what we consider sacred.
Totally. Like certain foods, you just know they go with certain holidays or
Oh, yeah.
family gatherings or whatever.
Absolutely. And then
Yeah.
you've got those foods that people just won't eat.
Yeah.
Maybe because of something that happened to them once.
Yeah. Or like something their culture tells them.
Exactly. Food, it's loaded with meaning.
It really is. So it's like Leviticus chapter 11.
Yeah,
It's kind of tapping into that deeper meaning.
it is. It's saying what we eat isn't just about being full. It's about showing what we believe
Oh.
and how we connect with something bigger than ourselves.
So for the Israelites, they were using food to like really live out their faith.
Exactly, to embody their covenant with God.
But it wasn't just about avoiding certain foods, right?
Right. It was the intention behind it,
Yeah.
the awareness that their choices mattered.
Like a mindfulness thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's about aligning your actions with your beliefs.
This reminds me of all those different diets people have now,
Right, there's so many.
whether it's for religious reasons or,
Yeah.
ethical stuff or health.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're still trying to figure out what to eat
Yeah, that's so true.
and why.
We're all searching for that clean way of eating, in a sense.
I like that. So are you saying, like, there are some parallels between these ancient laws and being vegan today?
Well, let's think about it for a second. Why do you think people go vegan?
I mean, from what I've seen,
Yeah.
it seems like it's a few things mixed together.
Okay.
They care about animals.
Yeah.
They're worried about the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And, they want to be healthy.
Right, it's a whole package.
Right.
And if we go back to Leviticus,
Mhm.
remember that part about not eating blood? How
Yeah.
it was sacred?
Yeah, it represented life.
It's like they were acknowledging the value of all living things.
Oh, I see. Even the ones they couldn't eat.
Exactly. And then there's that thing about the insects, right?
Yeah, how some of them were okay.
And we talk about how that could be about
Right. Minimizing harm.
sustainability.
Yeah.
And those ideas, they're very much alive in the vegan movement today.
It's a really interesting connection. So even though the specific rules might be different,
Yeah.
the core values, they kind of line up.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I came into this thinking it was going to be all about these old rules that don't matter anymore.
Right.
But it's so much more than that.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We go beyond the surface. We find the connections
Yeah.
that we might not have seen before.
It's like, who knew that an ancient text about what to eat could make us think about ethical dilemmas today?
Exactly. It shows that these old texts, they can still speak to us.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. From the specific animals to the bigger picture of holiness.
Yeah.
Even how these laws connect to what people choose to eat today.
And I hope our listeners have a new appreciation for these ancient texts.
Yeah. They're not just relics from the past.
Yeah.
They can still teach us things.
Yeah.
Help us understand ourselves.
And the world around us.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Leviticus chapter 11. We'll be back soon with another one.